All right, normally we would have the board meeting today, but so many of our guys are out of town and making news. We figured we'd just give them the day off, and we'll come back next week and continue on with the board meeting. But that's all right, because our next guest is got the front page story in the hometown newspaper, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. You can read it at stltoday.com. He's our good friend, David Hunn. Welcome back to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks for having me, as always, McGraw.
All right, so you had a chance to meet with this NFL Vice President, Eric Grubman, who is in charge of stadium development.
Yes, yeah, he was very interesting, 30 minutes to talk to. He was in town visiting with Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz, the, kind of Governor Jay Nixon's two-man stadium team. The idea was that the NFL can be more than just a the bad guy. They can actually help develop the stadium, which Blitz and Peacock were pretty excited to hear. So I think that the NFL is engaging, and that might be the good news in all of this, is the NFL is engaging more actively than maybe we all realized.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, because he sits down with you, and I guess Bernie and Jim Thomas as well, to start their public relations assault on, hey, wait a minute, we're not so bad. We're here to help. We're here to help figure out a way to sort of bring the two sides together.
Yeah, and I like the way you put it, McGraw, because I'm not sure how much reality's behind it. It's always hard to know. I mean, I guess I take people at face value until they've proven to me otherwise, right?
Right. So but basically he said was, for the you tell me, you were there. That's why you're here. But basically, he said to keep the Rams, you're going to have to build a stadium.
Yeah, he did. We talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of these nagging questions that we really haven't been able to get a good answer for. And at one point, I just asked him, so hold on a second, are you saying that the new stadium is necessary? And he said yes. I mean, that maybe was the clearest message. It was the clearest message he gave. The Edward Jones Dome failed. The negotiations failed. Almost the dome as an entity failed. And now there has to be another solution. There is no other stadium that can handle this, or that can be retrofitted or renovated. Therefore, there must be a new stadium. Did he also allude to the fact, I think I read it in yours or one of the other articles, that if the Rams leave, getting another team is more or less of a non-starter? Yeah, he did say that. He said right now you never know when people are going to change their minds, right? So I always want to be careful with what I say. But he said straight up, expansion is off the table. Is not on the table. So there's not going to be another team, and nobody's discussing there's not going to be a new team, and nobody's discussing a team moving to St. Louis. The Rams are the St. Louis team. They are proceeding as if the Rams are the St. Louis team. Everything else I think he called so far so undesirable he didn't want to talk about it. Yeah, and we've talked about it here numerous times that if you are going to lure another team, which is a giant if and impossible and whatever else, you still have to build that person and that team a brand new stadium for them. Yeah, and moreover, I don't even know what the timeline of that would be weird, because you can't build a stadium without the team's money. Right. Right. So it's like chicken, egg, cart before horse, like all those cliches. Right. It's the Arizona Cardinals moving to Phoenix and waiting 20 years to build a stadium, or like in St. Louis where we built a stadium and sort of hoped for a team to sort of come. Yeah, that's one of the points. I'm glad you brought that up, because anything can happen. Anytime I think I've said this on your show before. Anytime somebody says they know what's going on, inside I'm chuckling, because no one knows what's going on. I don't think Kroenke knows. I don't think the NFL knows. All of this is happening in flux. I'll tell you what, McGraw, I believe right now that the NFL is proceeding as if St. Louis is going to stay. They're trying to help come up with a solution. I think they are preparing for it not to work. Right. Which leads me to my next question, is he alluded to this NFL executive you had a chance to talk to. The article is at stltoday.com and on the front page of the paper. He alluded to the fact that, while Stan Kroenke hasn't made an official offer, Stan Kroenke is certainly looking at the pretty girl in the skirt down the street. Yeah, so that was the other thing that struck me, and it didn't even hit me until a little later. It was pretty subtle in the conversation. This was the first time that an NFL executive has openly said Kroenke has told the NFL that he is looking elsewhere.
Right. Yeah.
So, we all guessed it. I mean, that was kind of a big deal for me personally because I felt like I was always guessing. So Kroenke has a stadium. Is he bluffing? Is it a negotiating tool? What does this new stadium project in LA mean? Well, now we know that it is not a bluff. That he is looking. I suppose people could argue it still was a bluff, but.
Right, but here's the NFL.
Clarity.
Yeah, here's the NFL officially saying that one of their teams is looking at moving somewhere else and sort of weighing all their options, more or less.
Yeah, and that was a big deal. I mean, nobody said that yet.
Yeah. So this NFL executive Grubman comes to town. He meets with some of the members of the media. He meets with Dave Peacock. Did he meet with any elected officials?
Oh, good question. I didn't ask him that. I wish I had that foresight. I don't think so. I think it was a pretty focused meeting, but I'm not sure. Yeah. The governor never really tells us what he's doing, so it could have easily met with the governor without telling anybody.
Right. And just the overview of this all, I think where we as the public are missing something on this, and I can't quite put my foot on it, but or my finger on it, but it just something doesn't sound right with Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz sort of running this and the NFL coming. There was no elected official, helping to shepherd this through. There's every other IKEA and stadium and development. You've always got some type of, elected official, saying why it's good and this and that. It just seems like there's nobody else besides Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz who are trying to get this through.
So Grubman used a very interesting term to talk about elected officials. And it was when he was talking about the fact that the St. Louis plan isn't yet quite real. And what he said was a real plan has, already assembled the land and already assembled, and he used the word assembled, public officials. And I just thought that was I think he said authorities.
Right.
Assembled authorities. It's such an interesting way to describe it. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it is, I think, a window into the way, big business views elected officials, things that need to be assembled.
Well, and this, you don't get to be the vice president of stadium development without slightly, lightly touching certain rails along the train tracks. And that's a really telling an interesting point of view, and sort of might tip their hand and say, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, this is a great idea, but you haven't assembled 75% of the land. It might take you 10 years to assemble 75% of the land.
Yeah, it's all of this. And the other point that I thought was very interesting was there is some urgency here. He said, Grubman said that they expect, he used words like soon and things like that. But then at the end, we all pushed really hard to get him to give us a date. And he basically said, listen, I put at the end of the story, by December 31 is too late, is basically what he said. This needs to happen this calendar year. At least that's what they want.
Yeah. So he said, and let me just make sure I understand what he said correctly, because he said it's not too late, but it's certainly not too early. Now's the window.
Yeah, he used words that kind of were almost horse race in tone. Now and then at the same time he said, "Listen, this isn't a race," but you can't help but sit there and think that it's not a race. It's as if whoever comes up with the best stadium proposal the fastest wins. I mean, again, he rejected that idea outright. But that's the tone. That was the tenor of the conversation.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you can't. If you're Stan Kroenke, you can't make a decision until you have all the facts. And if the clock is ticking and he needs the facts, he's gonna. And the facts are sort of set in Los Angeles. What are the facts here? I can't decide whether I'm staying or going until I know what it is the offer is. Yeah. And you better get me all the particulars because I'm going to make a decision.
McGraw, one more point, if we have time.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing I realized sitting and talking with him is that the NFL as an association works much like many nonprofits. Goodell is the director, and he recommends to his board action. And that may be the unknown here, is what the board, meaning all those 32 NFL owners, what they're going to do. I mean, it seems like as much as NFL executives may shepherd things one way or another, we really don't know what's going to happen because the board has to vote.
Right, but there still has to be a negotiations. Who's going to own the naming rights? So what about the parking, the split on the tickets, and all of that stuff? And you're going to put in X amount, and we're going to put in this much amount. I mean, all that needs to be negotiated, which is, as far as we know, not even being talked about, right?
Moreover, that won't be discussed until all those other parts are in place, until those elected officials and land are assembled.
Right. So there you go. Well, that's the straight from the horse's mouth. Doesn't get any better from that. David Hunn, St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter, covering this Rams story. Met with the NFL executive. Read it all at stltoday.com or pick up a newspaper at your local newspaper stand. David Hunn, have a good weekend. Thanks, buddy.
Pleasure talking to you, McGraw.
All right. 9:22 here. Big 5.